There is a moment before any sound is heard when the entire orchestra inhales together. The room does not change, yet everything is different. That hush, alive, electric, waiting, is the way reality feels when you become still enough to hear its first note. In that pause, the world is not objects and names, it is music, a lattice of frequencies weaving themselves into form. You haven't left your life, you've slipped beneath it, to the place where the script is written as vibration before it becomes event. You and I have always sensed it. A subtle pull behind the eyes, a gentle gravity inside the chest, drawing attention inward toward the center where time holds its breath. Most people call it intuition and move on. But if you linger, if you refuse to rush past that luminous delay, it opens. A corridor of listening that runs through memory and possibility at once. You look with your awareness rather than your eyes, and the scene answers back, not with words, but with tone. The universe speaks in resonance, and the heart is the tuning fork. Here, the question of purpose stops sounding like a goal and starts feeling like a pitch you were born to carry. Divine purpose is not a ladder you climb, it is a frequency you remember. It's the note that was humming through you before your first breath, and will be humming after your last, steady, patient, calling you from beneath the noise. You don't acquire it, you align with it. When you do, reality doesn't obey, it harmonizes, as if the field around you had been waiting for your tone to come back into tune. This is the threshold of the quantum observer, the one who learns to watch without grasping, to feel without drowning, to know without naming. The observer discovers the seam between thought and world, the tiny silence where energy chooses a direction. That seam is not empty. It is charged with potential, trembling with futures that lean toward the mind that gazes upon them. The double slit is not a quaint experiment from a distant lab. It is a metaphor for your day. Observation is not passive. It is the choreography of the invisible. Stand here long enough, and you notice patterns repeating with the patience of tides, lessons returning in new masks, relationships circling until the note is tuned. You stop asking life to be different and start asking, what is the frequency of my seeing? When you shift that, the scene shifts, not because you forced it, but because the field echoes what you hold. Fear calls its own proof. Trust reveals pathways that were present all along but hidden by interference. The mind thinks outcomes are earned. The field knows outcomes are resonated. So we begin with a vow of stillness, not the frozen kind that denies the world, but the living kind that listens it into order. We will travel through 9 hidden frequencies that awaken your divine purpose, not as doctrine, but as experience. Each frequency is a doorway, and each doorway opens by tone, not by argument. You will not be asked to believe, you will be invited to remember. Remember the texture of awareness before it was crowded by urgency. Remember the warmth in the body when a choice is true. Remember the wideness that appears when you stop pushing. This is not about becoming special, it is about becoming precise. Precision is love without noise. When your attention becomes clean, your life becomes tuned. The observer does not escape the world. The observer composes it note by note, gaze by gaze, breath by breath, until the melody of your origin begins to rise through the day like dawn through a window. If you listen now, you can hear it faintly, the original chord of your being vibrating under every doubt and every hope. Do not strain, let the silence carry it to you. In this light, purpose is not a map, it is a music, and tonight we learn to hear. There comes a moment in every soul's evolution when the outer story collapses beneath its own weight, when achievement loses its flavor, certainty dissolves, and the question that once hid beneath ambition begins to rise. Who is it that is living this life? For the quantum observer, that question is not philosophy, it is ignition, because in that instant, the center of perception shifts from being inside the experience to standing at the still point that generates it. You are no longer a character within the dream. You are the awareness in which the dream is appearing. This is not detachment, it is remembrance. For awareness has always been there, watching, listening, pulsing quietly beneath thought, beneath emotion, beneath the rush of doing. The awakening of the observer is not a single event. It is a gradual unraveling of illusion, a peeling back of layers until only consciousness remains. You begin to see that everything you have ever called reality is not happening to you. It is happening through you. Your perception is not a window, it is a projector. What you hold in vibration, the field, translates into circumstance. At first, this realization can feel unbearable, for it dismantles every story of blame. If reality mirrors consciousness, then every shadow we meet outside is a reflection of something within. But that same realization is also liberation. Because if the world is reflection, it means we are not its victims, we are its authors. Modern physics whispers the same truth beneath the language of mathematics. Observation alters outcome. Possibility collapses into form the moment awareness meets it. In the quantum field, the act of seeing is an act of creation. David Bohm called it the implicate order, an unseen ocean of potential folding itself into visible patterns through the medium of attention. The observer is not separate from the observed. They are a single continuum of meaning, and yet humanity still lives largely as if they were apart from the whole, chasing purpose, as though it were hidden somewhere beyond the horizon. But divine purpose is not a destination waiting at the end of struggle. It is the frequency encoded in the act of seeing itself. Purpose unfolds the moment perception becomes conscious of its own power. Every thought is a pulse of energy, every emotion a wave sent into the field. The quantum observer learns that the universe does not respond to effort, but to coherence. Coherence is when thought, emotion, and intention vibrate as one. When the mind says I desire, but the heart says I fear, the frequencies cancel each other out, the field receives noise. But when heart and thought align in harmony, I am, without resistance, reality organizes itself around that tone. This is the secret rhythm behind creation. Consciousness does not manifest through willpower, it manifests through resonance. The observer's awakening, then, is not about controlling life, but becoming so aligned that life has no choice but to mirror that clarity. Purpose begins to reveal itself not as an answer, but as a direction, an internal gravity pulling you toward coherence. You start to notice synchronicities, patterns repeating, meetings that feel orchestrated, moments where time bends to your readiness. The rational mind dismisses them as coincidence, but the deeper self knows. These are feedback loops of awareness confirming alignment. You realize that destiny is not written, it is tuned. And the instrument is you. The more you observe without judgment, the more reality becomes transparent. The layers of resistance begin to dissolve. Fear loses its grip. Anger turns into information. Pain becomes a teacher of balance. You start to see the divine intelligence moving through all forms, even the broken ones. Especially the broken ones, because energy hides its lessons where attention fears to go. This is the beginning of mastery, when observation transforms from passive awareness into active communion. You no longer watch reality, you listen to it. Every experience becomes a dialogue between you and the field, an exchange of frequencies teaching you the language of light. To awaken as the quantum observer is to remember, you are not here to escape form. You are here to reveal the formless within it, to stand in the storm and remain unmoved, to feel deeply but not drown, to love fiercely but without possession. For when consciousness awakens to itself, the dream does not end. It becomes lucid, and within that lucidity, divine purpose begins to sing. Science, when followed far enough, always finds itself staring into mystery, and mystery, when listened to deeply enough, begins to sound like science. Between the two lies the bridge, the luminous threshold, where the measurable meets the ineffable, where the universe begins to suspect that it is conscious. To understand the observer is to understand the mechanics of creation itself. For centuries, science believed that the act of observation was passive. The observer, it said, stood outside the experiment, neutral and untouched. But with the dawn of quantum physics, that assumption shattered. In laboratories across the world, light itself began to behave as if it could feel the gaze of awareness. The double-slit experiment was simple, almost childlike in its design. Shoot particles of light through two slits and record how they land. When unobserved, the particles behaved like waves interfering, dancing, forming patterns of probability. But when a conscious observer measured them, the waves collapsed into particles, choosing a single outcome, as if awareness had cast a vote in reality's unfolding. This was not supposed to happen, yet it kept happening. Every repetition whispered the same heresy. The universe is not a cold machine, it is participatory. Consciousness and matter are entangled in a dialogue of creation. Physicist John Wheeler would later call it the participatory universe, a cosmos in which each act of observation helps the universe decide its own history. David Bohm expanded further, suggesting that what we see as separate particles are ripples of a deeper, undivided field he called the implicate order. According to Bohm, everything we perceive as solid is the visible rhythm of an invisible wholeness, a holographic sea of information folding itself into form. If this is true, then consciousness is not an accidental byproduct of matter. Matter is a byproduct of consciousness. Awareness is the ground from which energy organizes itself into atoms, cells, galaxies, and lives. Now look inward. Within your chest, trillions of cells hum in electromagnetic precision. Each cell carries roughly 100 trillion atoms, each atom composed mostly of empty space, a vacuum alive with quantum potential. Inside that vacuum, particles flicker in and out of existence at speeds faster than time, guided by fields of information. This dance does not occur in isolation. Your consciousness, your very attention, entangles with that microcosmic theater every moment. You exist. Biologist Bruce Lipton found that a cell's behavior is not determined solely by DNA, but by the environment surrounding it, especially the energetic signals it receives. The cell membrane, like a living ear, translates vibration into chemistry. Fear, gratitude, love, all carry electromagnetic signatures that alter the expression of genes. This process, called epigenetics, suggests that thought and emotion are not abstract. They are molecular instructions. What you believe, you broadcast. What you feel, you encode. At the HeartMath Institute, researchers measured something ancient traditions always intuited. The heart is not just a pump. It is an oscillator of intelligence. The electromagnetic field it generates extends several feet beyond the body and pulses with information far stronger than the brain's field. When emotion and thought harmonize, the heart's rhythm becomes coherent, sending signals that organize every system in the body. Coherence is not a metaphor, it is measurable order. During coherence, brain waves synchronize with the heart's rhythm. DNA unwinds and repairs more efficiently. The immune system strengthens. The body literally tunes itself to higher frequencies of organization. When you sustain gratitude or compassion, the field around you becomes structured, resonant, clear. And because all fields interact, your coherence influences the coherence of everything near you. This is why presence heals without words. The observer's field is not confined by skin, it is participatory with the whole. Quantum biologist Mei-Wan Ho described the body as a liquid crystal, a network of light conduction. Each molecule resonates, exchanging photons at the speed of thought. Consciousness, she said, may be the symphony of these coherent oscillations. The body is not a cage for awareness, it is the instrument through which awareness sings. Einstein once remarked that the field is the sole governing agency of the particle. If so, then the state of your field, your emotion, your coherence governs the behavior of the matter that forms your life. The same equations that describe electromagnetic resonance in atoms apply, metaphorically, to emotion. When frequencies align, they amplify. When they clash, they cancel. Your internal resonance determines whether the universe around you echoes as harmony or noise. Even time itself seems to obey the music of perception. In the delayed choice experiments of the late 20th century, researchers found that the act of observation could alter events that had already occurred. It was as if awareness were reaching backward, editing the script after it had been written. The boundary between cause and effect blurred, revealing that the observer is not bound by linear time. Mystics have long said the same, that the present is not a point between past and future, but the field in which both arise. Modern physics agrees, describing time as a dimension woven from probability, not sequence. What you expect shapes not only tomorrow but the memory of yesterday. Consciousness, it seems, is the true arrow of time. Consider this through the lens of biology again. The heart begins beating before the brain is formed. In the womb, it is the first rhythm that defines life. Long before thought arises, resonance already speaks. That rhythm never stops. It merely changes octaves. When the heart stops, the song dissolves back into the larger field. So perhaps consciousness does not live in the brain at all, but flows through the brain the way music flows through a flute shaped by form, yet not bound by it. Neuroscientist Carl Pribram proposed that memory itself is holographic, distributed across frequencies rather than stored in a specific location. This means that everything you have ever experienced still vibrates within the field of the body. When you recall an event, you are not retrieving data. You are tuning to its frequency. That is why emotion can resurrect the past so vividly. It recreates the original vibration, momentarily bringing that reality back into phase. The observer learns to use this consciously. By changing the emotional tone of memory, you literally rewrite the past's energetic imprint, altering the probabilities of the future. Forgiveness is not moral virtue, it is quantum recalibration. Through this lens, prayer, meditation, and focused intention cease to be mystical superstitions. They become acts of physics, ways of aligning the electromagnetic coherence of the human field with the universal field. When monks or healers meditate together, instruments record shifts in the surrounding magnetic environment. When thousands gather in collective coherence, global sensors detect subtle but measurable changes in Earth's geomagnetic field. The planet itself responds to the emotional tone of humanity. We begin to see that consciousness is not local. It is not confined within the skull. It is relational, holographic, distributed. Rupert Sheldrake called these informational webs, morphic fields, patterns of resonance that link beings of similar vibration. When a new behavior emerges in one part of the species, it becomes easier for others to adopt, as if the field itself learns. Evolution, then, is not merely genetic, it is vibrational. Awareness accumulates, and the collective frequency of the planet rises accordingly. This means your awakening is never private. Each coherent thought contributes to the calibration of the whole. When you steady your field, you quiet the collective field. When you observe without fear, you thin the fog for millions. At the most fundamental level, everything is vibration. Max Planck, father of quantum theory, once said, "I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness." The smallest units of existence are not particles but relationships, fluctuations of possibility. The universe is an infinite network of frequencies tuning and retuning itself in response to awareness. And yet, within this cosmic immensity, the human body is a precise receiver designed to translate infinity into experience. The vagus nerve carries emotional resonance from heart to brain. Microtubules in neurons, as theorized by Penrose and Hameroff, may operate at quantum scales, suggesting that consciousness interacts directly with subatomic fields. The skin, the fascia, the very breath each, is a conduit for information. You are not living inside the universe is living inside you, sampling itself through your senses. When you walk into a forest and feel peace, It is not sentimentality, it is frequency synchronization. The fractal geometry of trees, the 7.83 Hz pulse of the Earth's Schumann resonance, the photonic shimmer of sunlight on leaves, all resonate with your biology. Your nervous system recognizes home. That recognition is not thought, it is coherence. Inversely, when you step into chaos, crowds, conflict, noise, your field begins to distort, reflecting the incoherence of the environment. Yet, the quantum observer remains aware that even distortion is data. It shows where harmony is needed. By re-entering coherence through breath, stillness, gratitude, you broadcast order back into disorder. You become the tuning fork through which chaos remembers its rhythm. This is the true function of the observer in the scientific sense: stabilization. Awareness stabilizes waveforms. When consciousness remains steady, the probability field around it collapses into order. This is why those who master presence often find that life magically aligns around them. It is not magic. It is physics responding to sustained coherence. Einstein's equations never included love, yet love is the purest form of coherence the human system can sustain. Under its influence, brain hemispheres synchronize, heart rhythm becomes harmonic, and immune response strengthens. Love, biologically, is resonance. Spiritually, it is the recognition of self in all. Physically, it is constructive interference between fields. When you love, you amplify existence. Through this marriage of science and spirit, the boundaries that once divided them begin to dissolve. The language differs, but the music is the same. The mystic speaks of light. The physicist measures photons. The healer speaks of energy. The biologist records bioelectromagnetic communication. The poet speaks of the soul. The neuroscientist studies consciousness. Each, in their own dialect, describes the same unseen architecture, the living geometry of awareness. The observer, then, is not simply a witness of this design. The observer is the design made self-aware. When you realize that, a new kind of science begins, the science of inner physics. You become both experiment and experimenter, both field and form. Each breath becomes data, each emotion a signal, each silence a recalibration. When your attention sharpens into neutrality, you begin to perceive the underlying code, the quantum signatures that shape coincidence and choice. You feel when an action resonates and when it fragments. You begin to operate not by thought, but by tone. Life turns from problem to pattern, from accident to algorithm of meaning. This is the threshold where science bows to consciousness, where equations give way to experience. It is the moment the cosmos looks back through your eyes and recognizes itself. And so, as the observer awakens through science, they do not reject logic, they sanctify it. They see physics not as cold law, but as divine language, an instruction manual for creation, written in waveforms and wonder. The truth whispered by both mystic and physicist is this: reality is not built of things, but of seeing. The particle and the prayer, the cell and the soul, they are expressions of one luminous principle, awareness observing itself into form. Long before quantum physics etched its equations into chalk and silicon, ancient mystics whispered the same truth through symbol and silence, that the universe is not a mechanism, but a mind dreaming itself into form. Every culture, every age carried its fragment of this memory, carved in temple walls, woven into scripture, sung around firelight. They did not measure particles, they listened to vibration. And what modern science calls frequency, they called spirit. In the Upanishads, the seers of India spoke of Atman, the eternal self that is one with Brahman, the field of all existence. As is the microcosm, so is the macrocosm, they said. The same current that moves galaxies moves behind your breath. The same silence that births the stars waits between your thoughts. What the quantum observer calls the field, the sages called the self, unchanging, unborn, infinite. The Hermetic philosophers of Egypt and Greece echoed this principle through their axiom: as above, so below, as within, so without. To them, the cosmos was a living organism, every level of reality reflecting every other. The stars were not distant fires, but organs in the body of God. Humanity was the mirror in which the divine could see itself. They spoke of vibration as the first law, that nothing rests, that all moves, all resonates, energy spiraling from the densest matter to the most subtle thought. Across the deserts of Persia, the Sufis turned this science of correspondence into devotion. Rumi wrote, "You are not a drop in the ocean, you are the entire ocean in a drop." To perceive that truth is to awaken as the observer, to see that the distance between self and creation was always illusion. In their whirling, they became the still center around which existence spun, embodying in movement the same law of coherence the physicists would one day describe in equations of spin and symmetry. In the East, the Taoists spoke not of force but of flow. The Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao, they said, because naming divides the undivided. The Tao is the effortless harmony that arises when opposites cease their struggle and return to balance. It is the very state of quantum neutrality, the point where wave and particle, light and shadow, yin and yang dissolve into the same breath. The Taoist sage, like the quantum observer, does not control, they align. They move with the current because they are the current. The Gnostics of Alexandria saw the universe as the emanation of divine consciousness, descending through layers of vibration until matter condensed. They taught that awakening is the reversal of that descent, a remembering of our origin in light. They called it gnosis, direct knowing. Not belief, not doctrine, but the inner recognition that the spark within and the source above are one continuum. This gnosis is identical to the moment in quantum awareness, when the observer realizes that reality is not outside them, but an echo of their seeing. Even the Pythagoreans sang the same, frequency through mathematics. To them, numbers were not quantities but qualities of being notes in the cosmic harmony. The universe, they said, is a symphony of ratios, and the soul a string resonating to its tone. Centuries later, physics would rediscover this harmony as frequency, wavelength, resonance, the music of matter. The ancients were not naive. They were simply describing, in sacred language, what we now describe in scientific. Each tradition, in its own dialect, points to the same revelation. There is no separation between the seen and the unseen, between thought and world, between observer and creation. What we call quantum entanglement, they called unity. What we call coherence, they called love. What we call potential, they called spirit. These were not metaphors, they were instructions. They were the ancient blueprints of consciousness, reminding us how to see. The temple was never outside. It was the human field itself, the living altar of perception through which the cosmos remembered its own divinity. The observer's awakening is the return of these wisdoms through the language of light. For as the quantum physicist peers into the atom and the mystic gazes into the soul, both discover the same horizon, the same still point of pure awareness, humming beneath all things. The ancients called it God. The physicists call it the field. The poet calls it love. But in truth, it has no name, for it is the silence that gives birth to every name. Every scientific revelation and mystical vision finds its proof not in laboratories or scriptures, but in the quiet corridors of the human heart. The field of consciousness may stretch across galaxies, yet its most intimate experiment unfolds in our own emotions, in how we respond to life's beauty and chaos, to connection and loss. For it is through relationship, through feeling, through vulnerability that the grand cosmic principles become real. The quantum observer is not an abstraction. It is you, when you pause before reacting, when you sense the tremor beneath a thought, when you choose stillness over judgment. Each moment of awareness is a sacred repetition of the original act of creation. Every emotion, every decision, is the universe rediscovering itself through your nervous system. You are both laboratory and cosmos, student and source. Think of the last time you felt heartbreak. In that ache, something shattered not your worth, but your certainty. Reality rearranged itself around absence. What was once solid dissolved into questions. In that disorientation, you were standing at the very threshold of quantum transformation. Because when form collapses, potential awakens. The pain that feels like loss is often just the wave returning to its unseen state, the same process by which energy in the field reorganizes before a new pattern can emerge. The heart knows this, even when the mind forgets. Its rhythm carries the wisdom of stars collapsing into light. Every contraction, every pulse of sorrow or joy mirrors the oscillation of the universe breathing through you. This is not poetic fancy, it is the pulse of reality translating itself into emotion. Emotion, after all, is energy in motion, the language through which the field speaks to consciousness. The observer's task is not to silence that language, but to listen without being consumed by it. Feel deeply, yet remain spacious. Observe your anger, not to suppress it, but to see the truth hidden within its vibration. Notice your grief, not to drown in it, but to witness how love transforms when its form is gone. Awareness does not deny emotion, it sanctifies it. It allows energy to complete its cycle without leaving residue. In this way, daily life becomes a mirror for the quantum laws we've spoken of. When you hold resentment, your field contracts. The universe reflects it back through tension and discord. When you cultivate gratitude, coherence ripples outward, aligning events with grace. The outer world becomes a printout of your inner frequency. It may sound mystical, yet it is simply energetic correspondence. You attract not what you want, but what you are vibrating. The human story, the laughter, the betrayal, the longing, the waiting is the playground where consciousness practices its own reflection. Relationships are laboratories of resonance. They show you where you are still polarized, where energy still seeks integration. The people who trigger you most are not obstacles, but catalysts. They illuminate the frequencies within you that are still incoherent, still yearning to return to harmony. Each time you pause instead of reacting, each time you choose understanding over defense, the wave collapses into a higher order of being. You move from survival to creation, from repetition to revelation. This is not spiritual idealism, it is energetic engineering. The observer refines the frequency of their own field until life becomes responsive, fluid, almost musical. The ancients described this mastery as detachment, but that word has been misunderstood. True detachment is not withdrawal, it is transparency. It is the ability to love without clinging, to serve without needing, to witness without projecting. When you reach that state, your emotions no longer dictate the song, they harmonize with it. Look around you now. Every encounter, every delay, every coincidence is feedback. The universe is always mirroring the tone of your awareness. Your home, your work, your health, your relationships, each is a holographic reflection of your frequency. To change them, you need not force outcomes. You need only tune yourself. And as you do, something extraordinary begins to happen. People feel calmer in your presence. Situations resolve without explanation. The right words come unbidden. The world, once random, begins to move with intelligence. Not because you control it, but because you finally understand it is not separate from you. In that realization, the grand theories of quantum science become intimate, tender, profoundly human. You see that consciousness is not a concept. It is the way you breathe, the way you listen, the way you choose to love. And so, the mirror of the soul reveals its secret. Reality does not change when you fight it. It changes when you see it clearly enough to love it.